Greetings. Welcome back to Asafo Academic Lectures. I got another debunk video because these right-wing influencers cannot, or I should say, these right-wing influencers are disseminating information at a misinformation at a light speed pace. I could barely keep up. I really need like a team to put together a fact checking team so we can really get down to all of this because it's really taking time from other topics I want to get to. But when I see when I see these talking points being spewed out to the masses, I just got to do my part and just correct all this that is going on because a lot of people take this information and these talking points and run with it. But on the chopping block, it's not going to be Black conservative perspective. You can check out my other video I did on him about his commentary about the Woman King. But on the chopping block for this video is Hilary Fordwich, who is an economist, not a historian. So she's really not qualified herself to be speaking on this issue. It seems like they will put up anybody really to spew disinformation, misinformation about colonial history, really to excuse Europeans of their role in the entire situation. So I do have a debunk series if you want to check out some of my other videos as well too. But without further ado, I'll get into this video.
Owes black people reparations. Take a listen.
This wealth, and you hear about it, comes as England is facing rising costs of living, a living crisis, austerity budget cuts, and so on. And then you have those who are asking for reparations for colonialism, and they're wondering, $100 billion, $24 billion here and there, 500 million there. Some people want to be paid back, and members of the public are wondering, why are we suffering when you have all of this vast wealth? Those are legitimate concerns.
Well, I think you're right about reparations in terms of if people want it, though, what they need to do is you always need to go back to the beginning of a supply chain. Where was the beginning of the supply chain? That was in Africa. And when across the entire world, when the slavery was taking place, which was the first nation in the world that abolished slavery? The first nation in the world to abolish it. It was started by William Wilberforce, was the British.
So she wants to give points to, well, firstly, I'm going to show how she dug herself in, admitting that people do deserve, the descendants do deserve reparations, but she's trying to twist it now and put the responsibility on the African tribes, the African tribal leaders, the African kingdoms. So I did another video on Douglas Murray, and he did, if you watch that video, he attempted to redefine reparations as abolishing reparations for the British and trying to prevent enslavement from happening. So this is something that they're going to continue to do. They want to take credit for stopping it, but they don't want to take any credit for starting it. They want to try and differentiate themselves from the US. This is something Canada does as well too. They like to brag that they abolished enslavement before the US did. So we'll continue on.
In Great Britain, they abolished slavery. 2,000 naval men died on the high seas trying to stop slavery. Why? Because the African kings were rounding up their own people. They had them on cages waiting in the beaches. No one was running into Africa to get them.
So she wants to try and make it seem like African tribal leaders had Africans waiting on the beaches for Europeans, as if Europeans came onto Africa shores and found prisoners of war from African tribal leaders. She's not going to mention the firearms that they use to force these decisions, to force in Atlantic enslavement. They never want to take credit for how it started. They always want to take credit for ending it, and they want to put the responsibility elsewhere. But we'll go on.
And I think you're totally right. If reparations need to be paid, we need to go right back to the beginning of that supply chain and say who was rounding up their own people and having them handcuffed in cages. Absolutely, that's where they should start. And maybe, I don't know, the descendants of those families where they died in the high seas trying to stop the slavery, that those families should receive something too, I think, at the same time.
It's an interesting discussion, Hilary. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So that's pretty much it. Don Lemon is also not qualified to speak on history as well too. He's not first in it, so there was no pushback at all. They essentially just let this British women economist to come on and just say whatever. CNN usually takes a more liberal approach, so I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised of the non-pushback, the non-existent pushback at all. But it's just going to be 2 points to dismantle this thoroughly. First one is that the tribe she's referring to, the ones that she wants to put the responsibility on, those tribes, those kingdoms do not exist as they did before. But Britain, US, Canada as well too, they are much greater and much more powerful and much more wealthy. This whole issue, she was on here to speak about the wealth being transferred over. So obviously the wealth that they gained from enslavement, it still exists. But if you go to Africa and you try to seek out these tribes, if they still do exist, they do not have the same amount of, they do not have a fraction of the amount of wealth that other nations were able to get during this time period. So that's the first one. Why would descendants go to African tribes that don't have any wealth to try and gain reparations? You're going to have to get the reparations from the people who actually profited off of it and who started it as well too. That's another thing. So that's the first point. But to completely obliterate this whole talking point, she said that reparations is due. So she did admit that. She admitted that only to give a false premise on why it is due. But we're gonna go to 3 articles here. So the first one is actually a fact check by USA Today. So fact check, United Kingdom finished paying off debts to slave owning families in 2015. So this is reparations for slave owning families in 2015. So we're going to go down. So the claim, the UK government only just finished paying its debts to slave owners in 2015. Um, in the United Kingdom, this dispute has centered on the country's imperial history and legacy of enslavement. In 1833, Britain used 40% of its national budget to buy freedom for all slaves in the empire. Britain borrowed such a large sum of money for the Slavery Abolition Act that it wasn't paid off until 2015. This means that living British citizens helped pay for the end of enslavement with their taxes. Okay, so this post that was mentioning this got shared 20,000 times, so that's why they are on this. The story is echoed in Your Black World that belongs to Boyce Watkins, I believe. So when the United Kingdom abolished slavery, the government compensated slave owners for the value lost from freeing enslaved people. It is true the Bank of England only recently paid off these debts. Slavery and abolition in the British Empire. The British played an integral role in building the Atlantic slave trade, which enabled chattel slavery. I'm going to go on. Portugal and Britain were the two most successful slave trading countries, accounting for about 70% of all Africans transported to the Americas. So Britain was one of the most successful, okay? In total, about 3.1 million African people were transported to British colonies across the Americas and Caribbean. though only 2.7 million people survived the harrowing Middle Passage. Um, Let me just go down a little bit. Okay, here in 1834, the British government outlawed slavery in Britain and its American possessions, though not in its Asian colonies such as British India and what would become Sri Lanka. The British government also paid 20 million pounds, the equivalent of around 17 billion pounds today, to compensate slave owners for the lost capital associated with freeing slaves. This payout was a massive 40% of the government's budget and required many bonds to slave owners to effectuate the law. These obligations to slave owners and institutions are the debts that were paid off by the UK government only in 2015. Compensating slave owners after abolition, the UK Treasury continued to compensate the descendants of slave owners, for decades after the abolition of slavery in the empire. The payments were not scrutinized until the British Treasury tweeted out the historical fact in 2018. The amount of money borrowed for the Slavery Abolition Act was so large that it wasn't paid off until 2015, which means that living British citizens helped pay to end the slave trade, the tweet read. Okay, I'm not going to go through all of this. So their ruling is true. The British government only paid off its obligations to former slave-owning families and organizations in 2015. When this fact gained public attention, it turned into a major controversy in the United Kingdom, which has since been reignited by international reckoning over anti-Black racism and social justice. So. She wanted to put the onus of reparations on African tribes. But historically, UK paid reparations to the slave owners. So now, if she was consistent in her little theory or little idea that descendants of slaves, of the enslaved, should go back to Africa, that means UK would have paid not the slave owners reparations, but they would have paid the African tribes reparations by her own logic. But she's not going to mention this part of history on that clip. Don Lemon didn't know this part of history. This is actually what Douglas Murray in my other video I forgot to mention. This is what he was referring to when British already paid reparations. Like I said, he tried to redefine reparations by saying it was abolished. They were first to abolish it, and they were the first to try to enforce it to being stopped. He also mentioned that reparations was paid out 200 years ago, but he wasn't referring to his redefined definition. He was referring to this specifically to the slave owners. So, 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 so. So the slave owners were able to get reparations, but not the descendants of actual slaves. And now she is telling you that descendants of slaves should get reparations from African tribes, but African tribes were not compensated when reparations was paid out. So by her own logic is faulty and it falls completely apart for the simple fact that slave owners receive reparations, but the enslaved did not. The descendants did not. But living, living descendants of slave owners continue to receive reparations. It wasn't paid off till 2015, and that was with taxpayer money from today, from modern times and everything. So this idea that where are we going to get the money to pay reparations, it looks like they were able to find the reparations. I mean, granted, they did get a loan, but they decided to put that tab back onto the taxpayers. So was it right for the taxpayers to pay for was it right for the taxpayers to pay for the slave owners? but it's not right for the descendants to get any compensation. So here's another article. It's gonna get a little bit into it. Um, so here the British government borrowed 20 million pounds to compensate slave owners, which amounted to a massive 40% of the Treasury annual income, or about 5% of British GDP. The loan was one of the largest in history. So this article is trying to find the financial institutions involved. I'll go down a little bit. Oh, so this is the actual tweet that was referred to in the other article. Here's today's surprising Friday fact. Millions of you helped end the slave trade through your taxes. What a horrible way to even reveal this. And it just really shows the hypocrisy. I mean, the tone is as if, oh, look, you did a great thing and you didn't even know it. So it's crazy. British taxpayers would never have discovered they'd completed this loan repayments in 2015 if someone in the British government's Treasury Department hadn't posted this on its official Twitter channel to its hundreds of thousands of followers. So it's interesting. It'll be nice to talk to that person that put out this tweet, what the motives were exactly. So the tweet was deleted. So this is looks like a quote from not sure from who. So basically, my father and his children and grandchildren have been paying taxes to compensate those who enslaved our ancestors, and you want me to be proud of that fact? Are you fucking insane? So, I mean, I'm talking about the motives of this tweet, but it really could just be just tone deaf in nature, as if the person who put this out did not think there would be no backlash at all, and that people would just be happy about this fact. So there's just one more article on this. There's just a specific part that I want to pull up. Okay, so right here, as a result, there are now wealthy families all around the UK still indirectly enjoying the proceeds of enslavement where it has been passed on to them. Dr. Draper said there was a feeding frenzy around the compensation. John Austin, for instance, owned 415 and got compensation of 20,500 pounds, a sum worth nearly 17 million today. And there are many who received far more. 20,000 pounds, a sum worth nearly 17 million today. So this just goes to show where the wealth is, where they need to be asking. This Hilary Fordwich is just, I mean, I can say a lot of things, make up a lot of like, insults or whatever, but really she's just carrying the waters for the monarchy. She's really just pushing out this propaganda because they understand that we're in a world now where more and more people are learning the history. It's not hidden anymore. More and more people that were under the spell of the monarchy are waking up and finally putting the monarchy um, at a position to be responsible. Will it actually happen? I don't know, but the conversation does need to be happening instead of looking at the monarchy as icons and everything. I'm gonna put up one more picture just for everybody to digest. So, talking about reparations, we got all these jewels, different artifacts from all over parts of the world. So this idea that Britain should be exempt somehow when they were doing this all over the world is just incredible. Um, that's really all there is to it. It's been thoroughly and utterly debunked what she's trying to say. Um, yeah, I mean that is really it. For anybody who somehow disagrees, maybe you can explain to me how the slave owners deserve reparations, but the descendants do not, even though the last payment ended in 2015. So that is it. Another debunk video. Want to check out my other debunk videos? Check my debunk series. If you want to check out my other videos on my other topics, check out my channel. Like, comment, subscribe, share, tell a friend to tell a friend. Peace out. Till the next one.